Success isn't always deemed by where you finish, but from where you started. Some people will finish further up the ladder, but if they started further up the ladder in the first place, have they really been successful?
Tell me, who is James Golding?
I'm James Golding and I'm an inspirational speaker, endurance cyclist, 2-time cancer survivor, husband and dad.
What represents a challenge to you now? Because you have beaten cancer twice. You've been knocked off a bike, but now you're probably the best version of yourself because of what you've gone through.
Without a shadow of a doubt. And I've been criticised for saying it previously, and I completely understand why, but in many ways cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me. I went from 14 stone to 6. I lost the ability to walk. I had less than 5% chance of survival. Went through recovery and had to do the dance again. All the things that we go through shape us. It depends on how we reflect on those things. And when I got back into the house and started to get better, I started to unpack everything. And I started to find Mont Blanc pens, Tag Heuer watches, expensive suits that I'd owned because of what I did for a living. I didn't remember owning any of them. I hadn't missed any of them. All of a sudden they were irrelevant.
Welcome.
How are you?
Very well. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Tell me, who is James Golding?
Very good question. Sometimes I question it, but I'm James Golding and I'm an inspirational speaker, endurance cyclist, 2-time cancer survivor, alongside being a husband and dad. And I'm sure there's some other bits in there somewhere along the line as well.
We'll unravel them now. I think there's an underlying word I've been able to sort of watch and listen and talk to you before we filmed today, resilience. And I wonder how you would flip that back to me, the sort of younger version of James to the very kind of mature, calm James that's sitting in front of me now. How have you changed?
I think if I look back, I think the resilience has always been there. I think there's a number of people that I know that would watch this and go, calm? Like, seriously? Like, really? Certainly Louise and my kids would be turning around going, our house is mental. But I think I've always had that resilience, being told you'll never achieve anything to then wanting to prove everybody wrong, being told you can't do something.
I want to ask you something about the fact that the kid that was at school that didn't get on with school and was probably written off, told, you're not going to amount to anything, and that person that loves a challenge, to now have a business that works with, proper world leaders in business that you have that camaraderie with, and equal respect, if you like, because of who you are and what you've achieved. I just wonder how that feels to you.
I kind of like being able to turn around to young people and say, look, I was told I would never achieve anything. But I don't think it's uncommon. I think if you look around at a lot of the people that have been successful, I don't class myself as being hugely successful. I class myself as I've done all right. I'm not shouting from the rooftops. My aim in life is to be able to support my family, to be able to live in a nice house, to be able to maintain a relatively decent car and to be able to go on holiday. Yes, would I like the grandeur and everything else that comes with it? I'm not sure I would. And to be fair, that's just, it sparked something else that I remember when I came out of hospital. Sorry, I'm digressing a little bit here, but I remember when I came out of hospital. So when I went into hospital, I was living in a flat, which my dad owned, and the house that I had was rented out as bedsits. Because of me being ill, my mum asked everybody to move out of the house because she couldn't go and collect the rent on a regular basis. And she moved everything from the flat back into the house. And when I got back into the house and started to get better, I started to unpack everything. And I started to find Mont Blanc pens, Tag Heuer watches, expensive suits that I'd owned because of what I did for a living. I didn't remember owning any of them. I hadn't missed any of them. All of a sudden they were irrelevant. They were so important in that life leading up to that point that, yes, I've got a nice watch, but I've got a friend that helped me out getting that watch. Yes, I drive a relatively nice car, but at the same time, until 6 months ago, I drove a van, and though all of a sudden, these things that created this person were unimportant. yes, it's nice to be able to go, actually, I proved you all wrong, not because of what I've got, but because I didn't turn out the way you thought I would.
I think that's inspiring, because there's kids that, and I can relate, that in any one way didn't fit the academic one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore you're sort of resisting, you're trying to, your interests are elsewhere than learning algebra and how to use a Bunsen burner. And yet you're mixing and sharing a stage with the CEO of a FTSE 100 company and so on, and they're looking at you as someone they can learn from.
Yeah.
And I think that's an inspirational piece that.
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of, again, back to the younger generation thing. I think it's important to kind of try and instill in them that it's, success isn't always deemed by where you finish, but from where you started. Because, okay, some people will finish further up the ladder, but if they started further up the ladder in the first place, have they really been successful? But if you started back here and you've made it further than they have, relatively speaking, who's more of a success?
Huge amount of growth that's gone in climbing that ladder.
Correct.
Great analogy.
So I don't think we can go, oh, well, he finished there, so he's more successful than that person. And I think that's quite, we need to just kind of talk to the younger generation a little bit more about that.
Yeah, love that.
It would be helpful if schools made it easier for, like the guy we were just talking to a minute ago, to be able to go in. I did a lot of, when we were in the UK, I did a lot of trying to get into schools to do speaking sessions about the fact that I left at 14 and adversity and overcoming those things. And it was so hard to be able to do it. So hard to be able to do it. You're saying, oh, look, just let me in to do an assembly. And they wouldn't allow it. Or there were so many barriers that you couldn't just be able to, and I'm not suggesting that you just let anybody into a school to do a speaking session.
But you have a track record, you have a reputation.
But at the same time, how do we get this voice in front of these younger people? Yeah, a friend of mine said on a video we did once, James will tell you he's going to do something. If you tell him he can't, he's not the kind of person that will tell you that he can. He'll just go and do it.
So there's no fanfare, there's no fuss. That's the calm bit I'm picking up on. There's no ego that needs to be fueled by attention. You'd rather just go and make it happen and then ultimately be like, there you go.
Yeah.
Proved I could do it.
Yeah, I think
Which
so.
is actually comes back to doing it for yourself rather than any external validation.
There's a part that always would like the validation, but there's also the element that doesn't want it because it doesn't know how to deal with it. Like people say to me, well done on everything you've done. And I don't see that I've done anything different to anybody else would do in my situation. If I've been through, I think if anybody was put in the situation that I was put in when I was poorly, anybody would fight to survive it.
I get that. Although interesting enough, that's a mindset thing, because there are people that slip the other way, and I've been around people that have overcome, injuries, illness, and have been around other people they've shared a ward with and so on, and they've watched the light go out in the eyes. They describe it. So that's something that's built into you.
From my personal experience, I think that at some point in time, coming through trauma of some sort, I think everybody goes through the different phases at some point. I think the people that bounce and come back very happy, buoyant and energetic, at some point will crash. As in, will then have to deal with that situation at some point. And I think that there's some people that crash instantly and then find their way back. They don't always find their way back up to a different level, but I think everybody will go through two phases at some point within that recovery process.
Yeah, I like that analogy. That's a good point. It's different for everybody, and of course time plays a big part into that. It might be that you can allow yourself to recover, or in a certain situation you actually have to take action and move really quickly. Yeah. On that validation side of things, you're a world record holder.
I'm not anymore, but I was a world record holder. Yes, I was the first. I was the first British rider to hold the Guinness 7-day world record for most amount of miles cycled in 7 days in 2017.
Well, I'm still going to say congratulations, because that's hard graft, right? To have achieved that.
Yeah, it was hard.
I want to open that up in terms of what represents a challenge to you now, because you have beaten cancer twice. You've been knocked off a bike by a truck and suffered injuries from that. You telling me earlier about getting COVID when the fittest in your life, ready for a race you trained for, mentally, physically ready, and then COVID takes you out. So that resilient piece, and then where I'm going with it is the recognition of the resilience you've got, the strength you've now got, which I will call calm. I will call, there's a vibe coming off you that's really quite magnetic, and almost match that, where you feel like you could take anything on now. And I'm wondering how that's changed from a younger version of you that was still competitive, still taking on a challenge, but now you're probably the best version of yourself because of what you've gone through.
Oh, that, without a shadow of a doubt. I wouldn't be where I am now. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I wouldn't have done the things that I've done had I not have been ill, had I have not gone through what I went through. I would usually put a lot more context to it, and I've been criticised for saying it previously, and I completely understand why. But in many ways, cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me. It wasn't at the time. I went from 14 stone to 6. I lost the ability to walk. I had less than 5% chance of survival, and then went through recovery and had to do the dance again. Not as bad, but I think those are all the things that we go through shape us. It depends on how we reflect on those things, and how we kind of, as we were saying earlier, I'm very reflective. I kind of look at what's gone on before to enable me to move forwards. I think the resilience that I can show on a bike and doing the things that I do in terms of speaking engagements, in terms of riding a bike long distances, hot temperatures, cold weather's not really my friend. But I then battle with that resilience when it comes to arranging those things. So in terms of getting the sponsors that we need and creating those relationships, sometimes they're the kind of the behind the scenes battles that I have. Whereas you put me in a situation of, I think if you put me in a situation of trauma, I become calm. It's like that analogy, somebody that's dyslexic or ADHD can't send an email, but you send them into chaos and all of a sudden they just...
Time slows down.
Yeah, that's me.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's me.
Someone I've got a lot of respect for, who filmed with me early on the journey of Extraordinary Stories, asked me why I'd asked him to film. And I said, I find you so interesting. I find, if I tipped you upside down and all the knowledge that comes out of you, the lived experience, I learned so much from it. He said it's because I've got loads of scars. Yeah. And it made me think of you because I know you're physically scarred, is what you've gone through. But of course, then there's the mental side. But his point was actually the scars are, there's a reflection element. So actually there's a memory there. There's trauma that was endured and then healed. Mm. And then there's the lessons learned from it. And he said they make far more interesting people. Yeah. And I don't know how you feel about that. But
no, I'd agree. I would definitely agree.
You literally got battle scars.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, quite literally. But again, another conversation earlier on today was, if you look back at all of those scenarios, leaving school at 14, being told you'd never achieve anything, I mean, it's not so common now, but my mum and dad split up when I was very, very young. And out of a class full of 30 kids, there was only 2 of us in the class whose parents weren't together. So there was these little things, and that's not, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to turn around and go, my childhood, woe is me. I'm just saying there's all these little things over time that build us up to who we are. And yeah, I mean, physically, I've got a lot of scars. I've got a lot of scar tissue. And they are all things that you look back on and go, well, actually, if I went through that, when I talk about my challenges, here's another example of it. When I talk about my challenges and we talk about cycling across America, or we talk about race across America, or the 7-day world record, or what I'm planning on doing this year, and you kind of go, okay, and as I say to other fundraisers that I work with, if you're doing something for charity, so you're going to run the London Marathon, or you're going to ride Lantern to John O'Groats, or London to Paris, what you have to remember is that you're going to go through an element of, let's call it suffering, for 24 hours, 3 days, 7 days, or whatever that is. If you're doing that for charity, the people that you're doing that for, they go through it every single day. They don't get to cross a finish line. They don't get to go and have a beer and a steak or a bite to eat, sit there, pat themselves on the back and go, look what we did, and go back to work tomorrow. They have to go through it day in, day out. So I've got this subconscious that always goes, actually, you weighed 6 stone and couldn't lift your own head off the pillow. So even
which is
if
your reflection again,
which is the reflection. So even Race Across America, which was 2024, crashed between time station 44 and 45, broke 3 ribs, re-broke my hand, my neck had stopped working. There's videos of me riding my bike, holding the handlebars with a broken hand and holding my chin up. Because I know that once I finish and I have something to eat, then I'm going to be all right.
fair play to you.
But that's the fact of it. If we're sitting there and going, okay, I want to achieve X, you know, we're always saying, I hate the terminology, what's your 5-year plan? Like, I had a 5-year plan once and somebody threw it out the window. But essentially, if we're sitting there looking, okay, I want to look 3 steps ahead. How am I going to do that? How am I going to get 3 steps ahead? Well, it's 30 years back there. You've got 30 years behind you, which you can look back on and reflect on of how you got to this point. The reason why you're at this point now, looking at what's ahead of you, is because of everything that you've done before.
Yeah.
You didn't automatically just arrive at this point and go, oh, we're going to go and do that. Everything that's happened previously has led you to this point you're at now, looking further up the road and prepared you for how you're going to go and do that.
Yeah, there's a really interesting analogy there, where using this reflection point, where so many people don't actually live life to the full. And the people I've met that I would say live life to the absolute fullest, and you can feel it often, you can see it in your eyes, you've stared death in the face more times than you care to have chosen. You know, I think you had a 5% chance of surviving cancer. That's small.
Yeah. I mean, I went from 14 stone to 6. I couldn't even lift my own head off the pillow. So I was originally diagnosed November 2008, and they found an 11.5 centimetre tumour wedged between my spine, kidney and bowel, which originally was an abnormal mass. We would then need to do a biopsy, did the biopsy, and it was a primary peritoneal seminoma. And because of its location, it was too risky to do surgery. So I was put on a chemo plan, which was basically a week of chemo, 3 weeks off, week of chemo, 3 weeks off. And I was going to do three months of chemo. The first chemo was brutal. The second chemo just wiped me out completely. By February, Christmas, I was neutropenic, so I was kept in isolation. One friend was allowed to see me at a time. By February, I'd gone from 14 stone to 6, lost the ability to walk and couldn't even lift my own head off the pillow. My surgeon said that the night that he met me, I looked like one of the Mekons from the Dan Dare comics. And he didn't think that I had the strength to survive, but wanted to give it a go, wanted to see if he could make a difference. They rushed me into surgery, and the anaesthetist rang him and said, I don't think he's gonna make it through. They gave me some IV fluids, and then 4 surgeons spent 6 hours basically cleaning out my abdomen. Off the back of that, they brought my bowel out onto the surface. I had 35 stitches in my stomach.
That's a big scar.
I had 2 tubes in my right hand side. I had 2 tubes in my left hand side. I had a central line in my chest, and I had 2 cannulas in each arm, and was kept in an induced coma for just shy of 2 weeks. And then waking up from that coma, I was then kept in intensive care for a few extra days. And then I had to relearn how to do everything from sitting up in bed, moving my hands. I couldn't even move my toes. I couldn't do anything. Eating, I was allowed mashed potato and gravy, but I pushed the boundaries a little bit. There's one conversation which I talk about. Now, my surgeon, Phil Bargwanath, we speak on the 24th of February every year. Ever since, we have a phone call, because we get on. And people talk to me about who my inspiration is. And it's him. It's not anybody famous. It's not anybody sport-wise. That guy gave up his holiday to be able to look after me. That guy saved my life. I mean, there's an element of he took a chance.
Of course.
but at the same time, if he hadn't have taken that chance, and he openly says, like, if you hadn't have been as young as you were and as fit as you were, we'd have made you comfortable.
So he saw the potential for you to be able to fight through it based on what he had in front of him, and then match that to his skill set of actually being able to.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he says, look, I didn't think he had the strength to survive, but I had to do something.
Fair play.
And there's a conversation that we have, which was that following my final surgery, which is where they put my bowel back in, he came in to see me post-surgery, and I was sat there eating chocolate and ice cream. And he said, I thought you were on fluids only. Like, you shouldn't be eating that. And I was like, technically, chocolate and ice cream are fluids.
With a big smile on your face.
And he was just like,
friends for life.
I hope you go home tomorrow. and off he went. And then he came to see me the next day and sent me home. And now I saw him on the 25th of July that year, and he said, your tumour's got smaller, no more chemo. We're going to keep monitoring it, but I'm signing you off and you're free to go. And we, as I say, we speak every now and again, but we speak every year, 24th of February.
Special relationship.
If I haven't rang him, he's ringing me.
You're super inspiring to talk with. And I love the fact that you have told me who you find inspiring. I could literally sit with you all day, and the curiosity in me would be asking questions, and I'd be learning from this resilience piece, your sort of lived experiences. And so I'm going to call you a role model for that, a proper positive role model. And I want to flip that to the fact that we've got a crisis in young lads growing up, lack of identity, the manosphere. And I wonder, with someone that now appreciates life so much, you've battled to be at this point, and you appreciate time, you appreciate what you do with your time. What's gone wrong when you look at that from where you've been and who you are now, and the generation coming through that doesn't seem to gravitate to really good role models?
I think that's a can of worms.
It's a harsh question for you, but I'm coming at it from someone that you really value your time because of what you've gone through. And the next generation coming through, a lot of them feel like they're lost. And it's where do you find your inspiration from?
Yeah, I think there's two bits to that. I mean, there's no hiding. For me, there's no hiding away from the fact that there is still a battle going on in the background with me. There is still a battle of my identity, who I am, how I do it, and not for validation, but being able to get the traction to do the things that I want to do. There is still that going on. The bike is very much my medication of escapism. There is still, I went through a very, 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 I call it a grey patch, because I know people that have gone through dark patches, and I don't regard mine as being dark because I had a family, I had a nice house, and all those things. So I call it the grey patch, or the black dog sitting by the bed. And for me, somebody that's been through depression is like being an alcoholic. You don't stop being an alcoholic. That's always there, but you learn how to manage it. And every now and again, there's that urge or that thing that comes up, and you have to battle against it to pull yourself back in the other way. And occasionally, there's that time of where you can't pull it back, and you just have to go, I just need to ride this out for a few days. And you tell the people around you what's going on. So that battle is still ongoing, but I try and counter that with the things that I can do and the help that I can give and the impact that I can have. But going back to your question of young people, and it might seem like a bit of a flippant answer to this, but I think one of the things that we've lost is, and I'm only thinking about this now, and this maybe is an off the cuff answer, but kind of apprenticeships. Like, if we'd got more apprenticeships of where we were taking young people and giving them skill sets, whether that was in building, in engineering, and putting them in an environment of where that they were surrounded by, the grafters that there were in the, we talk about, a minute ago, we were talking about the fact that I learned to be a plasterer when I first left school. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's right, but I had a bucket thrown at me for like 6 months before I was even allowed near a trowel. But at the same time, those guys packed their lunch every night. They had a flask, and they were about their families and earning and learning. And
so you learned the culture. You learned discipline.
Yeah.
As well as the skill.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you weren't given it. You learned it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas it's now it's very different. I'm not saying that we should go back to olden times. Things progress, but those, back to your point, those male role models are very difficult to come by now because it's changed. And I think that's one of the things. They are male role models, but not in the right context.
No, I appreciate you. That's good perspective. Another thing,
I'm not sure that's the right answer. I'm not.
There's no right answer. I was asking you because of what you've been through. This is the the part I enjoy is that I don't know what you're going to say about. I'm interested to know, because I look at you as a positive force for good role model.
That's also why I don't want to know the questions I'm going to get asked, because I want them to be honest answers.
Yeah, totally. And what I find, the algorithm has a lot to answer for, but how do the sort of almost the negative voices rise to the top when there's people putting out such positive messages? And I think the purpose element, which we can bring into play, you've got 2112 coming up, the challenge, and we'll talk about that now. And I feel like that's really important to you.
It's like my nan always used to say, empty vessels make the most noise. And that's so true,
isn't it?
It's not just me, but other people that I know that are genuinely trying to make a difference and do things, or are inspirational speakers, or because they don't shout and make a certain noise, they don't get the level of traction. But then when you actually look at the person that's telling the story or posting the videos, another conversation we had earlier with another conversation earlier on was kind of, why don't you post more about your training? I'm like, well, because I'm training. That's why. Why don't you do so more Instagram when you're out training on your bike? Well, because I'm out training. Yeah, but so-and-so does it. Yeah, but they're creating content. They're not training.
It's not a priority to you.
No.
The training is training. I'm focused on it.
You look at, there's been some stories in the cycling press recently that, I went with a ride with so-and-so who's a cycling influencer, and it took like 10 hours to do a ride that should take 3, because they're stopping every 5 minutes to take a picture or set a tripod up and then go and ride past it. And I'm not saying that in cycling, but it's the same in everything else. If somebody's making that much content and telling you how much else they're doing, they're not really, because they're making the content. And that's the difficulty, is that content is then continuously coming out, whereas the people that do have a story or something to talk about that can be a positive influence on those young people, and I'm not saying that's me, they're actually busy doing it.
Yeah. So tell me about
or trying to do it.
Yeah, I get that. Tell me about 2112.
So 2112, last year was a bit of a struggle for me. Off the back of Race Across America, there was a lot of adaptation. And some various things happened kind of financially, which kind of pushed me a little bit. And then we ran a couple of programs through the organisations that we worked with, one over in Ireland and one here in London. We had in the region of about 500 people taking part in different events. But the particular one that finished in Paris was, I stood in Paris and watched 247 people ride from London to Paris in 24 hours. When I saw them all cross the finish line, and it just reminded me of, actually, that was why I started doing this. I rode a bike for recovery. I turned that riding into fundraising. I turned it into escapism. I turned it into connecting people, being with other people doing things, and raising a lot of money being able to do that. Race Across America, in hindsight, had kind of pulled me away from that because of the focus that was needed to be able to do it, and the training. And I decided that something had got to change in 2026. And then I realised that June this year will be 15 years since I was last diagnosed with cancer. And I wanted to do something special to commemorate that. And I wanted to do something that I could potentially, so I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of people along the way, and I've never asked any of those people for any help. I've never asked those people for help in terms of talking about what I'm doing, because I've always felt that if I'm trying to win a race or I'm trying to break a world record, they're very solo things. So I kind of went, actually, how can I do something that's quite big, can celebrate 15 years, and potentially I can go and bang on a lot of doors and see what difference we can make. And then I came up with this idea of riding the Tour de France. But I didn't want to ride it in 21 days because it's 21 stages. So I didn't want to ride it in 21 days because, to be honest, I don't want to be away from home for 3 weeks. It's the truth of it. I like 3 weeks away from home is quite a long time. I like being at home with the family now. They're getting that bit older, and there's that real characters coming through. There's that banter, and then I kind of came up with 2112. So 21 stages of the Tour de France in 12 days. So roughly speaking, 2 stages a day, starting Barcelona after the pros, with the intention of finishing before the pros.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that's cool.
Yeah, so we'd start on I think it's the 13th, 14th, of July, and then finish in Paris on the Saturday before them. But the key to this is that I want to raise $500,000 for Great Ormond Street.
You're the chairman of the velodrome.
Yeah, so I've been involved with stuff for Great Ormond Street for a while. A friend of mine was chairman of the event, the Velodrome Challenge. He then stepped down a couple of years ago, and I came in as interim chair, whilst we'd got somebody lined up who we thought who's a very good, another good friend of mine who we thought was going to do it. Unfortunately, she changed her mind, and a positive shift means that she said, no, I won't be able to do it. So I carried on doing it, and now I've been doing it for 3 years. We've raised about 2.2 million on that event over the years, and they're building a new world-leading cancer centre at Great Ormond Street. I mean, it's impressive what they're doing there. I wanted to do something meaningful. I wanted to do something that would have an impact. I wanted to do something that would be lasting. So we have an agreement with Great Ormond Street that the money that we raise will be ring-fenced for special projects within the cancer centre. So that can be a host of different things, which we're just kind of talking through. Will that be a play area? Will that be a patient room? Will that be a family room for families to stay in whilst their children are going through treatment? I've been, as we've talked about, I've been on the other side of that fence. You know, going through cancer is one thing. A child going through cancer is something else. Again, it sounds a little bit flippant when I say it out loud, but if you turned around and told me that I'd got cancer again for a third time, I'd roll my sleeves up and do what I need to do. But if I found out that one of my children had got it, it would break me.
I knew you were going to say that.
It would absolutely destroy me. And I don't know, because I know what that feels like, and I wouldn't want them or any other child to have to go through that. And I think that a child going through it is bad enough, a parent having to watch their child go through it. I've always said that people watching somebody go through cancer treatment is often harder than the person that's going through it, because you're in it. You know, I can still tell you what time they turned the lights on the ward, what time breakfast was, what time medication was, what time the vampires, as we called them, which were taking your bloods every morning, F87880, still remember my hospital number to this day.
You do have a phenomenal memory, don't you?
You know, and I can remember what time lunch was. I remember what time the medication came around in the afternoon. I can remember all that because every day was broken down into one step at a time. Every day was broken down into, right, they're taking the stitches out, they're taking that tube out, they're taking that tube out. Everything was broken down into a process. But that person that's sat by your bed they can't do anything. They can't physically step in and take that away.
Not enough is necessarily always said or done for the people that are supporting those in crisis, those that are ill. So I think that's a really beautifully described, actually, way of making sure those people actually do need probably the support, and you got to be more aware of that, more self-aware.
So that's the plan. I mean, there's various things now starting to fall in, but they're starting to come together. We've still got a long way to go, but for the next, so we're sort of 10 weeks out now, and over that next 10 weeks, it is literally getting that funding into place, concentrating on time on the bike. I'm not as fit as I'd like to be right now. You can't chase fitness, but you can chase time on the bike. And actually time on the bike is as important as being fit. There's being fit and there's bike fit. They're two different. You can take a very, very fit person that can't ride a bike. Yeah. You can take a very unfit person that's used to being on a bike and they can sit on a bike for long periods of time. So I am perhaps resting on my laurels a little bit. I don't think it's going to be an easy challenge. But the next few weeks is literally about pulling that external team together. Whether that's people that are going to share the story, whether that's people that are going to help with fundraising, or whether that's sponsors that are going to come on board and help us kind of pull all of those bits together. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm off to Barcelona, kind of second week of July.
Yeah.
So it's my birthday on the 4th, it's my wife's birthday a couple of days later, and then away we go.
Fair play. Well, I wish you all the success with that. And it's like, there's a personal challenge there for you, and then there's the fact that, you know, so many people benefit from your efforts of fundraising and awareness as well that go with that. Yeah. Anything I can do to help in any way bring you more people, more awareness, and obviously this conversation, anyone watching, listening, you know, how can they reach out and support you?
Well, the website will be finished within the next few days.
Okay.
The main point of contact is Instagram or LinkedIn at the moment.
Well, we'll share the links when we put this out. We'll make sure they go out.
Yeah, perfect.
I knew I was going to enjoy this conversation. I don't want it to end. And can I thank you as well? You flew in from Portugal to film with me, especially. So that's heartfelt. Thank you.
You know, you invited me, so
yeah. Well, my criteria of learning from people with scars and knowing that they're the conversations we're having. Yeah, huge thank you to you.
No, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.